Hello, Americans. I'm Kenton McNall. It's Constitution time. Today is Tuesday, December 1st, 2020. We've entered the last month of one of the most difficult years on record, for at least during my lifetime. Won't be sorry to see 2020 go. We do seem to be in the process of getting past some very difficult constitutional times with our election, with the transition of power, and that, I have to admit, is a big relief. And there have been many big reliefs in the last few weeks. There is a change of feel as we have an outgoing administration and a new administration coming in. But we have to be careful not to be complacent because we still have many, many challenges, and this is not over yet. But as we think about the challenges ahead, it's important that we think about how we can face them together as Americans, as opposed to divided parties, such deep divisions that it seems hard to overcome, but we can overcome them. It doesn't mean we'll end up with one party. I can't see that. I can't see America having one party. It wouldn't be America if it was. But it can mean that we can get back to where we can do things together. This has been such an unusual time and such an unusual election that we forget that there are normal, strange things that happen during this period of this two-month period of time where you have an outgoing administration and new administration coming in. The Potomac two-step, as the institutions jockey for power, as individual people jockey for power and position, leadership. And that can get difficult enough. But it's even more so right now because of not only the weird things that have gone on and are still going on, but also because there's a lot of strange circumstances that exist. I keep hearing how long it's been since an incoming Democratic administration, for example, did not have both the House of Representatives and the Senate under Democratic control. We also don't know for sure which party will have Senate control. It looks like the Democrats will barely retain control of the House of Representatives, but much more difficult task with the runoff election in Georgia to get control of the Senate. And as we talked about many times, if the Democrats don't have control of the Senate, well, we could end up in a situation where we have the usual gridlock and deadlock and can get nothing done at a time where we really need to get things done. There is some hope that's been talked about because the incoming president, Joe Biden, is a person that can build consensus and reach across party lines. He has in the past. And with his extensive political experience in Washington, he's had to do that many times. And he also harkens back to a time when there was bipartisanship, when many, many bills, much legislation was passed in a bipartisan fashion. It was not always the way that it is now, that's for sure. And I don't think our country could have attained greatness if it was the way it is now. So there is organically some possibility that we can get more done. But the rhetoric so far would not lead one to believe that. I spoke in the last episode we had, which is a week ago, of some possibilities that exist if the incoming president is willing to do what the outgoing president did with executive orders, ordering things to be the way they should be rather than counting on bipartisanship, legislation, people working together. And one of the things I talked about was the possible use of executive orders to change the rules of the Senate. I heard another interesting conversation come up, actually, in the media. That, and it's something that I recently read again in the Constitution, that originally The Vice President of the United States is the President of the Senate. Vice President of the United States is the President of the Senate, with responsibility to set the agenda of the Senate, i.e., which bills are considered and make it to the floor for consideration. Right now, we have a situation not foreseen by the Constitution that's very, very difficult. With a majority, with a solid majority, either party, currently the Republican Party, the leader of the majority party would have a good chance to kill bills that come to the floor and are put on the floor for consideration just with that majority, especially with ultimate partisanship at work. But there's also the possibility that people would consider a bill with their conscience, not just as a party member, if they had the option, if the bill was put on the floor. But we have this very unfortunate circumstance right now where the majority leader can control what goes on the floor. And only by a really huge override can that be changed. So people don't have a chance, the senators don't have a chance to give bipartisan consideration to important bills that need to be considered because it never even appears on the floor. That must change. That needs to change. Well, why isn't the vice president the president of the Senate anymore? Well, as it turns out, that was changed by custom back, I think, in 1937. I could be wrong about that. That rather than the vice president being the president of the Senate, the president of the Senate, the power of that passed to the majority leader, and there's a separate president of the Senate, currently, I believe, Jerry Nadler, who is also from the majority party. Well, that custom can change, and it's very possible the president can change the custom. The president has that power. And if he doesn't have that power, the power can certainly be tested. So going back to the original words and intent of the Constitution, the Vice President of the United States could be the President of the Senate. Now, I don't believe that means that if the Republicans win the 2 seats or just one of the seats that's up in Georgia, that the Vice President would be able to vote to break a tie. But the Vice President would be able to say, yes, these bills are coming to the floor. And that opens a door to allow Republican and Democratic senators to vote their conscience. We already have a Democratic senator that frequently, Manchin from West Virginia, frequently crosses the aisle to vote with the Republicans to protect his seat. But the same could be true of senators on the right as well, if they had a chance to consider bills that should be considered. So the Potomac two-step can be taking on some different shapes right now as the unfortunate new powers of the president through executive orders that have been so stretched by the current administration may have to continue with the new administration. Of course, if the Democrats win the 2 seats in Georgia, then things can have a bit more normalcy, and perhaps such an order would not be needed. Another thing that's been talked about a lot that's very constitutional in nature is the power of the pardon. Now, I would not say, because I'm not a historian, that the power of the pardon has never been scrutinized before. I'm sure that it's been heavily scrutinized. My recollections over my lifetime, at least a sentient adult lifetime, paying some attention to what happens in Washington at this strange time, because a lot of pardons happen during this 2-month period when an outgoing president is doing his last tasks. But I don't recall overtly, deliberately questionable pardons. I know there have been some. Perhaps there have been many. And there have been many that just kind of, why would that guy get a pardon? Why would he be in line? The power of the pardon allows our country through its executive to show mercy to people. Recent pardon events that I personally did not disagree with were things like some of the poor folks that were put away for 20 years for minor possession of marijuana charges. Those are awful situations, and obviously you can't stand far back with no knowledge of the facts and say, every one of them is a awful situation for the prisoner. But I think many of them are, and I'm not against those folks getting out of prison and having a life again and getting off the taxpayer's dime. It's incredibly expensive to house people in federal prisons or non-federal prisons. So the power of the pardon has good use, but it can have bad use as well. Now, just before I came on the air today, news broke that the Justice Department is investigating a case of possible money for pardon, and I hope that's not going on. At least not at the highest levels of the land. But the interesting aspect is the president pardoning himself. Now, one of the core foundational ideas behind the Constitution is, unlike a king, no man is above the law. So to me, it has never even been a possible consideration that a president could pardon himself or herself, because by definition, that person would be above the law. They could sell nukes to our enemies, pardon themselves, and just keep going. Because you can't, what's the mechanism for removing someone who does that? Can they pardon themselves more than once? I also am very against the idea. I believe that every pardon should be paired with the crime they're being pardoned for, because I don't think there should be any such thing as a blanket pardon. We have no idea what that person may have done that you find out later. So there are some questionable things about the pardon. I'm not sure the framers intended it to be this no-holds-barred aspect of especially an outgoing president. But can a president pardon themselves? I don't know what the good arguments for a president pardoning themselves would be. I'll say this about a president pardoning family members, especially in today's media environment. You can certainly see situations where family members who may have done nothing wrong would be hounded mercilessly if anything did come to light that were even slightly suspicious. And perhaps a president would pardon a family member to keep overzealous prosecutors from going after their family. But I don't think I'm a fan of that. I can see some reasoning for that. But especially with the current administration, who has deliberately put their family members right in the path of power, can't do that either. Don't see it. But I definitely believe that a president should not be able to pardon themselves. And it will be interesting to see how that plays out. It's iffy enough if they do some maneuvering, as Richard Nixon did, to get their vice president put into the office of president, so the vice president can then turn around and pardon the president. That's happened once. And I don't think that was right either. But was at least more within the framework of what the Constitution might say, and does not directly violate the no man is above the law aspect of the pardon. I think that would be a good conversation to have with some of the friends of the program in an upcoming episode, especially as pardons start to roll out, and they certainly will. Now, I am not in any way, shape, or form saying just because there was some breaking news that the current administration and the current president is responsible for any kind of money for pardon scheme. I'm going to be honest, though, and say it wouldn't surprise me. I'm not really sure how many people it would surprise on either side of the aisle if something like that was going on. But if we say for this president or a future president that was the case, that they were selling pardons out of the office of the president, Should the president, can the president somehow be prosecuted for that? Can they pardon themselves for that? Well, I'm going to say no on the pardon yourself for the same reason as before. No man is above the law. But if a president can't be charged while in office, some of these circular arguments that have come up are become very interesting. It would clearly be wrong for a president to do that. Absolutely be wrong. And anyone in his administration that didn't get pardoned should also be prosecuted for behavior like that. It's one of those things that in the long term perhaps has to be looked at very closely and either much better defined by the Constitution or perhaps revisited as is this thing worth having? Certainly from the mercy aspect, I think that it is, but perhaps not impactful enough to be worth the now negative possible connotations of it, as the seams and cracks of our Constitution are so deliberately explored and exploited. There are a lot of other considerations that are, coming to the fore right now as we head into the end of the election, as we get past the states aspect of it. The next big event, of course, I believe is on the 14th, and is the electors, actual voting, tabulation of the votes of the electors. And the last, perhaps, major hurdle for this election is when the joint session of Congress and of the House and the Senate happen to validate those votes. And perhaps that's the last character test for the Republicans, who have remained fairly silent on what's been going on as our election system is attacked by the leader of our country. But I believe that we'll get past that as well, and we'll have a new administration, new president on January 20th. One thing I would personally say that has been a fairly significant relief is it has been less a part of my daily life to have to listen to every word that the current executive tweets. The media isn't reporting that as much, and it's just a lessening of the stress. I had an interesting conversation with my wife, Anne, who has, for every day of our marriage, read her paper front to back, and really absorbs a lot of it, and does all the puzzles and all that type of thing. And I used to read it with her, but I really can't read anymore. It's virtually impossible. It's too much work. I'm got the vision issues. So I unfortunately get my news from cable news, and a lot of that in the morning. And I have to say, and this will be a subject of an upcoming show, I'm more and more concerned about the media, because one part of the Potomac two-step that's been happening is watching how the media is already turning their attention away from the current administration and to the new administration, and already either going after that administration or completely supporting that administration, one or the other. But one of the things that I think that is got to be on our task list is to find out what divides us. But start with by saying, well, what are we on the same page on? And doing a little bit of work with a small group to try to find a way to do some research on this. What common goals might we all have on either side of the aisle? What are the common things that we all believe that we should be working on? Maybe infrastructure would be an easy one for Americans. And what are the common things that we're all worried about? Financially, medically, socially. But I asked my wife, I said, if you only read your paper and didn't listen to any of the news, which she doesn't listen to very much of it. Some of it she does, but mostly she's absorbed with the paper. Would you feel you were as divided as they're saying we are? And her answer was no. And I believe that might be the case because I believe the media is responsible for a lot of the division, because we watch too much of it, because it's much more editorializing than it is reporting a fact, because there seems to be a deliberateness to driving a wedge between Americans. So that it will be a topic of an upcoming program, and us getting in and exploring that a little bit, because I believe the media is playing a role in some of the bad things that are going on that keep us from figuring things out together, which is just so important for us to do. So the Potomac two-step is very much being danced in Washington right now, but it's hard to think right now that things aren't on the mend, at least somewhat. But that means, again, as I said at the beginning, we cannot get complacent. We have a lot of work to do in the United States of America to regain what we had and make it stronger and better, which is one of the calling cards of our president-elect. Certainly one of the things that's also helped with that feeling better effort is the idea that, yes, we have vaccines on the way for COVID, and that we will get past that as well. And that's been a blessing. Thank you for joining me this evening, Americans. And we'll see you again very soon on Constitution Time. Take care.